What if everything you know about building a business is backwards?
Every company that I've worked at, I basically got fired from every single one of them.
That's Jeff Pan. He went from building a 1,000-bed hotel company with just $5,000 to designing logistics software for SpaceX. Now, as CEO of Belli, he's modernizing air cargo, one of the world's most stubborn industries. His secret? A counterintuitive approach to rapid learning that's cost him over $1 million. I mean, that Upwork hack, that's something else.
I'm under the impression that there's nothing that you can't learn 60% of in 24 hours.
I've never once heard someone say what you just said.
This relentless learning fuels an even more radical strategy, optimizing for failure.
You're optimizing for frequency of failure. The faster that you can do the wrong thing, the quicker you actually get to the right answer.
From Myanmar military coups to taking feedback from Elon Musk, Jeff reveals why success isn't about being right. It's about failing faster than everyone else. Tune into the full conversation now on Winning Friends. Welcome to Winning Friends, the podcast where coffee meets conversation and where we uncover the real stories behind entrepreneurial success. I'm Logan Merrick, and this is Dylan Hay.
And today we're joined by Jeff Pan. And if you like origin stories with some pretty wild pivots, I think you're in for a good ride on this podcast today. Jeff's gone from building a hotel in New York to designing logistics software used at SpaceX, helping scale Booking.com, AirAsia, and now is the CEO of Belli, air cargo software, modernizing one of the most stubborn industries in the world. Jeff, welcome. We're really glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I think we have a bunch of things we can talk about today. Your story is very interesting. The first small thing I wanted to pick up on is when we were researching you ahead of the episode, your LinkedIn profile reads like the dream CV or resume for a lot of people. We noticed you have a pretty interesting style of approaching your LinkedIn. Is that intentional, or you were just
No,
how did
look,
you approach?
I started off as a digital nomad, just like you guys, and I just kind of kept trying to figure out how to make it more ruthlessly efficient. And I never really optimized for my CV. I didn't have my first job until I was in my mid 30s. And one
How
thing
old are you
kind
now?
of just, I'm 42. And one thing kind of just led to another. And I would have never imagined that in the process of just trying to be a digital nomad that I would have ended up at McKinsey and SpaceX and running an airline.
What was the first digital nomad thing you did then? Was it some random side hustle? Were you drop shipping? What were you doing?
My first thing was, you know how today they have a bunch of Airbnb entrepreneurs, so that was kind of doing that, but before Airbnb was around. So I started off with 6 rooms in New York. $5,000 in cash was enough to get my first building. And that was before Airbnb was around. So you had to figure out your own customer acquisition and how to get guests. I had no idea what I was doing, but over 12 years, grew the business to 1,000 beds. And then in the course of that, had to build software for it. And then that was how I got into building software for hotels. And then that ended up leading into Booking.com, and then building software for SpaceX, and then building software for airlines as well.
So how did you end up working with Booking.com?
I obviously had spent a lot of time running hotels. I'd spent a lot of time building hotel software, and at the time, Booking.com was investing heavily into those areas. So for me, it was quite fascinating. It's almost like when you're a hotel owner for many, many years, and then you go behind the curtain. It was quite a fascinating place to be.
Interesting. And we read a story somewhere, or someone told us a story that you had a kind of interesting experience in Myanmar around COVID. What's the background to that?
Yeah, so while I was at Booking in Amsterdam, I noticed that there was just Asia in general was a very blank spot for the company. We weren't winning in key markets. We were getting our asses kicked in India, Southeast Asia, just completely blind spot. And so I started researching what a lot of these companies were doing to succeed, and kind of reverse engineered it, and left the company and ended up setting a Booking.com travel e-commerce site in Southeast Asia. I was a little bit scared of going into Indonesia because there were some very heavily funded competitors. So I ended up starting in the easiest possible point, and just started in Myanmar. At the time, they had just opened up, so it was this complete blank slate. My developers there grew up without the internet.
Wait, do you mean open up as in to the world?
Yeah, they literally didn't have mobile phones 2 years before I'd come there.
And Myanmar is near Vietnam, or?
Yeah, it borders Thailand. And then things were going pretty well. We were going super fast. We were, I think at one point we were processing like I think 1 out of every like 5 airline tickets in the country.
Wow.
And then, you know, a pandemic hit and a military coup, and then that was kind of the end of it. So didn't see that coming.
So what happens with the military coup? Like, how did that affect your business? Because that
Well,
basically means that the military overthrows the government, right?
yeah. So everything shut down. Obviously, like a huge disruption. You had to go to your software engineering team and say like, you've got to do what's best for you, and like a lot of them left. So that kind of put a dent in things.
Yeah, but it's still around, no?
It's still around. It's still around. The new CEO took over. It's back to its pre-COVID numbers, which is good. But I think the long-term growth story of that country, I think, needs some time to rework itself.
I'm so curious, like, so you've worked in and created a variety of different businesses now. You've worked in the likes of Booking.com, SpaceX, we'll talk about later. This business you're talking about in Myanmar. Like, there are so many different angles that we could approach this, but like, how do you identify these, I don't know, like high barrier opportunities? Because like Myanmar, for example, right? You said like, you just explained that like it was so obvious to open up something there. But I feel like most people are never going to have this idea.
Scary as well.
Yeah. So is this based on like, are you a guy that really leads with what the numbers and the data tells you, and you had access to good data to help you make those calls? Or like, how do you identify those like high value, but potentially pretty high barrier to entry opportunities as well? Like, what does that look like?
I think the first thing to point out is that the things that are doing are actually quite similar. Filling beds in a hostel, filling capacity at an airline and cargo, filling rooms and software, like all of these things are actually quite similar, right? So I think the skill set does transfer from industry to industry. I think for a lot of these things, the best startup ideas come from when you believe something that other people do not, right? If you're doing something that everybody else believes, then by definition, you're probably going to have a tough time. So where you always try to lean in towards is trying to find something that you believe, and you try to quickly validate that. So a very easy example is like Uber and Airbnb. They believe that at the time you could let strangers into your car or your home, and at the time everybody thought that was stupid, but they quickly validated that. And essentially every successful startup in the history of the world has been exploiting a unique insight that only they knew. And so if you kind of follow the trail here, Myanmar, nobody believed that you could build a fast-growing e-commerce site there. With what I'm doing now with air cargo, nobody believed that you can change the way that airlines run their business. And you have to very quickly go in. You have to take a little bit of a leap of faith and test it. But once you kind of figure things out, you basically have an unfair advantage in a market.
Yeah, and I feel like these, like, I don't know if we want to call them legacy industries or spaces, but they're so ripe for disruption right now. It feels like what everybody is talking about, right? With like identifying these opportunities to really change.
And a lot of it is first principles thinking, right? Like you're taking something that everybody believes to be true, like airlines won't change this, and then essentially you're just keep poking down to the why behind the why behind the why. And once you break that down and you figure that out, some things actually can be proven untrue, right? I hate to use this example, but Elon Musk talks a lot about SpaceX and how he reverse engineers first principles on that thinking. And we kind of apply the same methodology to what we do as well.
That was the kind of the similarity that I was seeing as well. But like, okay, so going to somewhere like Myanmar, like at that time, that's a bold move. Like, don't you have reservations or, fear for oneself? Or
I just hopped on a plane. I mean, almost single thing that I've done at one point, I've hopped on a plane, and you kind of just figure things out when you get there.
And you just don't think about it like, it's going to work out? Or
you pray, just sheer force. No, seriously, I remember when I first opened up my first building, like in my early 20s, like I didn't know what I was doing, but you kind of figure it out. Same with you guys. When you guys started your business, like there's a great unknown, and just by sheer force, you can kind of get that first couple of like.
Well, I almost feel like every day I know what I'm doing, but I also have no idea what I'm doing at the same time.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I feel like I'm just learning.
Yeah.
Each day that goes by.
SpaceX, like hopped on a plane, just figured things out. Just this whole journey right now, same thing. Like hopped on a plane, figured things out.
With the background that you have, the businesses that you've created and worked for, that doesn't happen through chance, right? It's like through talent, and then I would imagine network too. Like how does something like SpaceX happen? How do you get a call from someone at SpaceX?
How come I haven't got a call yet?
Yeah.
A lot of it is on building surface area for luck, right? So a lot of this is a combination of luck, but also creating your own luck. So,
Building surface area for luck. I like that.
so the SpaceX call happened because they found me because they had seen my video online about me talking about building flight systems in Myanmar. So they'd seen that video. That happened because I got really good at building flight systems and hotel systems, right? That happened because I'd run hotels for 12 years, but I was working in obscurity in a very like niche field for many years. And you just kind of dig at it and dig at it and dig at it. And in everything that you do, if you stick with it long enough, you eventually like figure out the white space before anybody else does. So it was definitely surface area. It's obviously opened up a lot of doors with airlines as well. Another example is we recently landed a really big customer in the Middle East in an airline. And that happened because the incoming chief information officer was actually a former consulting client in Singapore, right? And so all these little moments that you have that you don't really think of suddenly like compound themselves over 5 or 10 years later. And that's where the magic happens. But it's this relentless just concentration of surface area and surface area. Going to SpaceX, and what most people don't realize is that it's actually open to the public nowadays. Going to SpaceX is actually one of the most inspirational things that you can ever do as a founder, as an entrepreneur. The moment that you get down there, you immediately see and feel that there's a different vibe there. Everybody is laser focused on this greater mission in life. I remember talking to the bus driver who was shuttling the SpaceX employees between the airport and the campus. And I said, "Oh, what do you do?" And even that person is like, "I help people get to Mars." Right? As you drive into SpaceX, and this is in the early days, you'll see cars on the side of the road just parked because there's this long road that gets to the Starbase launch facility, and essentially it's all these engineers that are just sleeping in their cars overnight because they're just exhausted from working there. It is the most amazing. Like in most companies, when you kind of talk about like, hey, can we do this thing? You immediately get like the 10 reasons why you shouldn't do it.
Right.
There, you're sitting in the cafeteria and you're overhearing these like ridiculous conversations. There is nothing that you can tell them like, oh, hey, how do we send something to the sun or something? And they immediately begin reverse engineering like first principles on the 10 things that they would have to disprove to get there. Right. It's an insane place to be. It's one of the most inspirational places I've ever
Did that change your thinking about business building?
Yeah. I think the biggest, the story I like to tell is, do you know who a guy named Roger Bannister is?
Is he a runner?
Yes.
The 4-minute mile guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the time, like nobody thought the 4-minute mile was possible.
Yeah.
Right. And then Roger Bannister obviously was the first one to do it. That wasn't the interesting part of the story. The most interesting part of the story was that what happened after. Immediately after that, suddenly everybody started running the 4-minute mile. And even today, I think high school kids run the 4-minute mile. And essentially what you always want to be is you always want to surround yourself with people and situations that are the Rogers Bannisters of the world, right? Another example is my pre-seed investor who wrote my first check. I never thought that I could grow my startup as quickly as possible, right? But they push you on this thinking, and you start seeing other companies in the world in the cohort that start, pushing really amazing growth, and it actually opens up your mind into what's possible. So I think a lot of being a founder is surrounding yourself with people that can kind of break these imaginary ceilings on how you think about things.
Do you think that what it takes to build a company is like extraordinary effort and energy, or do you think that it's a lot of technique?
Well, we'll have to define company, right? I think there's a lot of different companies out there. I think for what I'm doing now is a high growth startup. There's also lifestyle businesses. Like at one point I was a digital nomad. I just wanted to like live in Canggu and hang out, right? I think if you're running a digital nomad business, it's about just removing yourself as much as possible and going that route. For high growth business, it's about finding unique insights and then exploiting them as quickly as possible.
It is essentially leverage, right? It's like technique.
Yeah, but I mean, think about your, when you were doing your business, right? Like you were probably doing customer acquisition and running some like campaigns, right? And you probably figured out some channels work that didn't. And essentially you're just constantly like exploiting that hole and doubling down on it. And you're just constantly doing that, right? And now with startups and just everything that's out there, the niches are smaller. the speed at exploiting these is much faster. So everything today is about just finding something that you believe to be true and that only you know about.
The way I would approach it is I would find these opportunities, and then I'd exploit them for buying my time back. Whereas you're exploiting them to grow, to build layers.
Yeah, I think the thing I'll say is like 5 or 10 years ago, if you did that, like you could live comfortably. The difference now is that those windows close like within days, within
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
So you talked about breaking through like glass ceilings or limiting barriers that you set for yourself. What was the last? Can you remember the last time you broke through something like this? What was the last thing that was you're like, oh, this isn't possible?
What I'm doing now is I'm basically building software for airlines to help them manage their cargo. And if you look at the entire industry, it's all large companies that have been around for 30 years with hundreds of employees. And so essentially you have to convince yourself, you have to delude yourself into believing that you can actually compete against these companies. And so I think the first thing that I had to break through was just even for my own self that I could actually do this. So, and you also have to delude others into also believing in your vision as well, right?
So it's like the imposter syndrome and then secondary imposter
It is.
syndrome.
Yeah.
It is because essentially what you're working towards every single day is as a founder, it is never the mathematically correct decision. Like if you multiply the expected value times like whatever the payout is times the chances of like getting to that, it's never the mathematically correct decision. And so you internally have to believe that you can actually beat the odds. And the moment that you don't believe that, like it's game over, right? And so as a founder, like you actually do have to need this little Adam Newman syndrome where you believe like you can do these things that are possible, right?
And you've been like a lifelong entrepreneur, but you've also worked inside of some huge companies that we've talked about already, right? How do you feel about this conversation of like intrapreneurship versus entrepreneurship? Like, do you feel everyone should start at a big company? Do you think everyone should start their own thing and then move to a big company? Like, how do you, if someone is watching this and they're like, okay, I've maybe just started my business or I'm thinking about starting my business, like which route do you think is most successful for them?
I do regret not doing a big tech experience earlier in my career. So I think a big tech company is a big company is an amazing way to find opportunities to work on because you get exposed to a worldview that like you would never have as a digital nomad in Canggu, right? I was very deliberate about each company experience. I've never actually worked at a company for more than like a year or two,
Right.
but every single one, it was with the intent purpose of trying to figure out what was next. When I joined Booking, even my boss was like, listen, I don't see you being here very long. When I joined McKinsey, I said, listen, I'm only here to find my next startup opportunity, and I want you to expose me to industries that like average founders can't access. And they were like, yeah, sure. What do you want to do? And so that was actually how I got exposed to air cargo.
You mentioned before that when in order to like level up and be able to do things that you believed you previously couldn't do to break through these barriers, you have to surround yourself with people who don't believe in those limitations that you inherently believe in. How do you surround yourself with those types of people? Like where do you make those connections?
I use Upwork religiously. I'm under the impression that there's nothing that you can't learn 60% of in 24 hours. So I use Upwork in one of two ways. One is that you can find very niche subject matter experts in a specific thing. Like if you want to learn how to run like large scale Google PPC campaigns, you can. If you want to learn like any giant engineering thing, like you can. And you just bill them anywhere from 50 to a couple $100 an hour. And you can very quickly learn and get to 60% understanding of a topic very quickly. And then
So you just pay them to teach you, basically.
yeah. I think I looked at my Upwork account. I think we've spent over $1 million just personally, just on Upwork and just constantly churning through these things and growing.
$1 million education. That's brilliant, actually.
I've never heard of anyone using Upwork that way before,
No,
which is so fascinating to me because it's like Upwork and these other platforms are like used daily in the spaces that we work in. You know so much about them. We hire talent there sometimes too, and it's like I've never once heard someone say what you just said.
No.
Yeah.
And like actually on the surface, it seems like a really obvious and great idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
Okay, let's say you need to do something very complex, right? You can either pay an agency to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
learn
expensive.
nothing. Yeah.
You learn nothing, exactly, right? You could either do it yourself, which obviously doesn't scale in the long term, but you should always do something that is, you should always understand something 60% of the way there, because if you don't, like you're essentially just burning money, right? And so you might as well burn money on yourself to learn that education. Because essentially, the way to describe it is running a startup is basically you're optimizing for frequency of failure. The faster that you can do the wrong thing, the quicker you actually get to the right answer, right? And so essentially, like Upwork helps accelerate that 10x, 100x. So
Can you remember what the last thing was that you like commissioned someone on Upwork to help you with?
yeah, there was a very specific like engineering integration that I did, and like nobody, there's probably only maybe like a few hundred people in the world that know how to do this specific integration, and found like four, hired all four of them to do the thing. Immediately, you start to understand the differences. And then you settle on the one that you work with, and then obviously the project is wrapping up. But again, you can get from 0 to like 60% within 24 hours.
Wow.
Imagine telling someone building a business like 50 years ago that the access to information that we have available to us.
If you scroll through my Upwork, it's this fascinating like history log of all these things, of just all these interests. Like I remember I learned like AutoCAD in one day from a guy in New York. I learned. I built like my entire Philippines back office, just like you did. Just this fascinating history of like all these just various interests and directions, and to be clear, 60 to 70% of them just go nowhere, right? But at least you're figuring that out in a day or 2 days.
So that's why you commission 3 or 4 people to do the same job, and then you pick the one that you like the most.
You're optimizing for frequency of failure as quickly as possible.
Optimizing for free. Man, I feel like I'm learning so much at the moment.
Yeah, you got some great sayings.
Good
too.
nuggets, yeah.
It's like dating in your 20s, right?
Yeah, it's reps, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then eventually, you get good at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they say you do anyway.
Yeah, so some people get good at it, right?
Yeah,
So
I haven't gotten good at it.
And so on the like entrepreneur thing, one thing you said is, okay, when you went to these companies, you were very intentional of, I'm only going to be here for a year or until I find my next thing. I know a lot of people that hear that will think that, okay, to a lot of employers, that's a red flag and it makes you not an attractive hire. I know a lot of people say that. Personally, as running a business, if someone came to me with that level of directness, I would be very excited to have them work with us, because those are the people that push things forward significantly more than others. But like, is that a challenge that you ever encountered, or like how should people think about that now?
Okay, so I'm about to give very bad career advice, right? So
I feel like the bad career advice is often the best career advice.
That's a good hook as well. Bad career advice.
okay, so what you're optimizing for when you're interviewing for a job, or when you're like, chatting with VCs, is you're optimizing for you're optimizing for high variance. So in other words, when I was going through kind of like the interview process, I would say that 90% of that, like people that I talked to, like just hated me, right? like immediately crossed me off the list, right? So you're correct in that. But McKinsey, to their credit, like I was true to myself. I was completely true to myself on what I wanted. I was completely open and transparent, and they were like, "Yeah, come here and do it," right? Because that was what they wanted. And if you look at it from their perspective, they're used to getting like Harvard MBAs and Wharton kids, and this was like a very refreshing, honest, authentic view on this, right? Now, on the flip side, if you're an employer, again, every company is a little bit different. Some people want just stability and 3 to 5 years. For me, I look for people, right? I'm very proud, because when I look at all the startups that I've had, and I look at all the people that have come through, they have all gone on to do startups. They've all gone on to work at big tech companies, and I was one of their first hires, right? So I actually openly look for those people, because what's good for you is good for me. And if I can't harness your ambition and your energy, that's my fault, right? And when I was working at some of these companies, like I would openly look for these people, and I was glad to be their stepping stone onto something big, right? And if you look at some of these very big companies, like the Palantirs of the world, they openly are very proud of the fact that 1 out of every, let's say, 4 product managers at Palantir becomes a founder, right? So if you can harness it, like you can do really great things.
In your recruiting process, then, like, how do you identify someone who is of this nature and someone who isn't?
You look at their behaviors. I think so. For example, at McKinsey, like I remember like interviewing a lot of like very smart people, and I was in a venture building practice, and you can tell, like if you say, hey, where else are you interviewing, and they kind of give the standard answers. Like,
KPMG, Accenture.
yeah, like then no, like nothing in your history is telling me what it matches what you're saying, right? Another thing too is that I used to get yelled at McKinsey was I would spend the first 20 to 30 minutes of every interviewing basically going through a list of 20 reasons why they should not work at McKinsey and how terrible of an experience it is. And usually that filtered out a lot of people as well. But essentially the crazies who ended up like being convinced of that was actually a good thing to them, right? So again, you're qualifying out a lot of these things.
On both sides of that coin, you're the interviewee, and on the other hand, you were being interviewed. You approached it with a very authentic, here's what it is, here's who I am, or here's what the company is. And if it fits, it fits.
Yeah, because
and then you go for what
What's
volume.
the point otherwise?
you've interviewed hundreds of people, right?
Yeah.
Like you can tell when people are giving you like a boilerplate answer, right?
Yeah.
And so my advice to people is like, be yourself, be completely upfront on what you want out of an experience, because essentially what you should not be optimizing for is, let's say, the percentage of interviews that goes to the second stage. That's what you should not be optimizing for. What we should be optimizing for are the 1% of the openings or whatever that really love you, right? It's kind of like dating in your 20s. Like you're not optimizing for second dates. You're optimizing for the one person in the entire world who looks past all of your flaws, loves you for those flaws, and like, right? And you ignore all the 80 times that you just get rejected, right? Because it's not important. So you're optimizing for outliers.
How do you approach that with your business now?
Frequency of failure. So I meet with 2.5 airlines face to face every single week. You are going in with as high of a velocity as possible. Like same thing. The key to this is with everything that I do, like whether it's running an investment round with VCs or recruitment or go to market. Like you are basically going with the full force of talking to as many people, as many VCs, as many airlines, as many candidates as quickly as possible in a short amount of time, right? And essentially, like most of the time, you don't know what you're doing, but very quickly after the first couple conversations, you refine and you have a clear understanding. But essentially, you're optimizing for frequency of failure and speed.
Did you ever do any like competitive sports at any point in your life?
Yeah, can you tell?
Well, because I'm thinking of like these traits are. So I look back at my experience to date so far as well, and like successful people that we've hired or that I've worked with in the past, and I always say like people that have done higher level competition in sports display these traits. Or I first started my career as a sales guy, right? And it's like the most successful salespeople that we used to have were people that were also competitive in nature. I get the competitive vibe from you. So have I called that right?
Yeah, the difference between, let's say, being a founder versus being a competitive athlete is that a founder, the difference between me and, let's say, the greatest founder on earth is, I don't know, like this much. I played basketball. The difference between me and like the greatest basketball player on earth is like this much, right? Like there's a physical limitation to that. So so at least with running a business, you at least have the potential to reach the top. I think I knew very early on that I was not going to make it to the NBA.
Would you say that's a difference in IQ? Because you seem like someone who's intelligent.
No, I don't think it's IQ. Again, I was actually a pretty poor student, right? I had average grades growing up, but I think it's more about raising your floor rather than maximizing your ceilings. So what I mean is, if you want to be in the top 0.001% of a specific skill set, that is very difficult. But if you want to be in the top 70% of a specific skill, you can actually get there in a week, right? And the key on being really good at what you do is actually getting to the top 90% in 2 to 3 very specific skill sets that actually have nothing to do with each other, right? And you can get there with a high velocity and high frequency, right? So like I happen to just be really good at like building utilization software, right? I happen to get really good at like recruitment and building a company and running the day to day, right? And again, that was possible for me to be the top 2 person in like physics or that's impossible, right?
Are you relentless? Are you like a relentless guy?
Yeah, I mean, again, you have to be willing to fail, right? And it's not a scary thing to do. Like it hurts every time. Like there are VC rejections that hurt. There are people that decline job offers that hurt. There's a lot of pain that goes into this. So I think with any successful entrepreneur, sometimes you're only seeing the success, but like there's a lot of scar tissue that happens.
Why does it hurt?
Because you're putting yourself. It's like you're putting yourself out there, and you have to have really thick skin. You're getting constantly. It's very scary. I remember my first, like when I was doing all the hotels and stuff. Like I had no idea what I was doing, and I used to like fry myself to sleep because it was so painful, right? There were, like, when I was running my restaurant in New York, like so many things went wrong. When I was running this startup now, like there are very public missteps, right? I think there's even a like a game show thing that I went on where like the Shark Tank thing, like where the judges like kicked me off the stage, right?
What?
Kicked you off?
Yeah, I mean, I went on really early, right? But like that is a very public rejection.
Do you mean early in the morning, or like, what
No,
would
like
cause
early,
that?
early in the business process, right?
Oh, so
You
they
didn't
were
realize,
like,
I went on at 6 a.m., so I was a bit rusty. Or
no,
something.
but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you must have said something wrong. You got
No,
kicked
but like
off.
you have to, and you know, VC rejections, like that is a very difficult. That is
Yeah.
a very
That's
that is
rough.
a very like difficult game.
Have you had to work on like trying to remove emotion from business? Because I've had to try that a lot over the years, and it's like I feel like there's some value to trying not to get too emotionally attached to what's going on within the business. But then at the same time, I feel like every time I try and remove my emotions too much, you then lose touch with like what's truly important within the business, right? Because I think so many people just couldn't handle it. Like you said, if you think about over the years, all of the times when people have said no to you, when things have gone wrong with team members, when you've had I'm sure you've had legal letters at some point from some company trying to do something to you, like it is relentless. Like it never stops. And it could be very easy to focus in on that rather than the positive like change that you're making. Like think of all the hundreds of people that you've been involved, probably even thousands of people with like hiring or mentoring or helping them grow. But it's like, it's natural for us to remember the failures the most, right?
It never gets easier.
Yeah.
It only gets 10 times like more painful because the stakes are higher.
Yeah.
I think people also over glamorize startups in general. Like it's
Oh my God.
Dude, it
it's
sucks.
terrible. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. It sucks. I think I think we're doing a disservice to people because typically when you read about startups or when you meet founders, like you are only seeing the 1% of the 1% that made it. Like,
Yeah.
you are not seeing the people that tried and failed and couldn't get past the first step.
And then even when you get onto your next startup, say you have a successful first one, you get onto the next one, you're back to the grunt work again. You don't start at the top. You know, you're like, I don't know, this one guy, he started his next company. He sold his first one, started his next company, and he's cold calling, you know, to build up business. And he's cold calling because he's good at it, you know, and he wants to build the system for cold calling. You know, it's not glamorous at all.
The other thing that's more difficult over time is the opportunity cost of time. So again, totally cool to do cold calling when you're in your 20s. A little bit harder to do it when you're in your 30s. Really difficult when you've got a mortgage and kids, right? And so I think doing a startup becomes more and more difficult as you get older because you have to do that grunt work to get something off the ground.
Do you feel like your energy is less now that you're getting older? No, you're not old. I mean, we're all around the same age.
Physically, yeah, man. Physically, for sure. Like
You're smarter, but you're not as energetic.
I mean, definitely, yeah.
It's a bullshit trade-off, isn't it?
I go for, if I ever go for like a heavy night of drinking now, like that is 2 days of my life that is gone.
I
stopped drinking.
I had to stop.
Yeah. I do like this trend that like the Gen Z kids now like don't drink because honestly, like in our era, like we were taught to just drink your faces off in your 20s,
Till you fall asleep.
which was totally useless, right?
Yeah.
When I was like 19, I was working in sales in the UK. So it's like every day was like this, you know? It's like we would work. I would get to work at like 7 in the morning. I would finish at 8, 9 p.m. at night. We would go to the pub. It's like every day.
Dude, when I was living in London, I was so shocked because it was very common there for everybody in the office to like have 2 or 3 pints during lunch.
At lunchtime, yeah.
Even my friends in finance did it as well.
Yeah.
I couldn't get over that.
Yeah.
And then what happens is over in my 30s, like you suddenly become conditioned to like have 2 or 3 glasses of wine during dinner, right? And it's all useless calories. Yeah. So I've definitely cut back on that now.
I want to ask about networks. So you, having worked at all of these companies, having built your own things, I would imagine the people that you have met throughout this time have probably been crucial to your success, but I don't know. Maybe that's like an assumption that we make, right? So when you're building something new or trying to raise more funds or trying to hire people, Have you been as intentional with your network building as you have with your companies that you've worked at and products that you've built and launched? Like how do you think about network?
There's some saying out there where it's like you're the average of the five people.
Yeah, you
five
spend the
people,
most time
right?
with or whatever. Yeah.
And essentially, you always want to surround yourself with like bar raisers, right? My first check was these two guys, Shuken and Brian. Phenomenal. Like they push you to the limits of being able of Roger Bannistering your own thinking on what is possible.
That's a verb now, yeah?
Yeah, right. And like I don't think I would have gotten here if it wasn't for them, right? They're constantly pushing you on what is possible and what is possible in a certain amount of time.
How did you find them?
It was one of those like surface area things. I happened to go to like this I don't know, one of those like startup events or something, and usually at these things like people go on there and just like talk about just stuff or whatever. But he was very unusual because like he immediately was talking about like how to hack things, right? And like the story that he told that like really resonated with me was, Futurama, the TV show.
Yeah, I love that show.
Basically, like at one point they were selling the Futurama figurines or something because he was a huge nerd. They were selling the things, but like you would actually get a randomized, you would get like a randomized character in each one, and obviously he didn't want to buy hundreds of these things just to get 20. And so what he figured out was that each figurine was slightly different in weight, and so he actually went out and got one of those like drug dealer scales that like measures things to like the 0.001, and he sat there in like the middle of a toy store like measuring every single one, and that's how he figured out how to buy exactly like 20 to get the 20 that he wanted. So I think that was what sold it for me as well. So obviously like they've ended up writing my first check, and they've been pushing on what's possible ever since then.
Do you go to many networking events and these types of things?
I do.
Do you like them?
I do. No, I hate them.
Dylan likes them.
I hate them actually. I just got back from 4 days in Munich at an air cargo conference where I'm the youngest one.
That sounds exciting.
Right, but what you're doing is you're creating surface area for yourself, and honestly, when you go to these things, 80% of the time, like nothing happens. It's a complete waste of time. But actually, more like 90%. But again, the 1% of the time is when it makes it all worth it.
I feel the same with networking events. I hate them. I feel like 80-90% of the time is completely not pointless, but the chance of you meeting the right person or someone that's relevant to you if you're just going to a normal like business networking event is so slim. I get the vibe in the sense that you're all about like expanding the surface area of opportunity, but I would imagine you seem like the kind of person who's also very strict about like time management. I could be wrong there, but like, are you trying to focus on, okay, how do I make sure this conference or this event has opportunity? Like, how do you think about that?
Again, it's frequency of failure. Like if you're gonna invest 4 days at this thing, like you have to go in. Like I go in with a lot of prep. I
4 days at a cargo.
I scrape the list of all the attendees. You build your short list. You are going in and like a full head force, and you're talking to those people. I think where I get irritated is when I go to these things and I see like a startup that buys a booth and they just sit there. You're not creating surface level for yourself, right? We've heavily optimized this process over the years. I think one of the most frustrating parts about these like conferences and stuff is that they're quite expensive and they're quite big. What we started doing, our little hack is for example, for an airline conference, we chartered a yacht, and we figured out that the 20 airlines that we wanted to talk to, and we invited them onto the yacht.
Yeah.
So essentially you are now bringing the conference to you, right?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you can get in 3 hours, you can get the entire 4-day experience like in 3 hours. And they're stuck on a yacht too.
Yeah.
So they have to be at a certain time. And they're trapped on a boat with me, so like they have to talk to me, right?
Like the last couple of events that I've been to or done has been the same approach, not with the yacht, but like I've organized dinners, for example. And so I would target...
Cheapskate.
yeah, my budgets aren't yacht level.
No, honestly, no. Look, I did the last one that I did. I had to do it on a low budget. We did like tacos next to the conference, right?
Yeah.
But I think like these C-level suites, these VIP, they actually don't care.
The last one I did was I had 10 either VPs of growth or CMOs at SaaS companies, and we framed it as like a dinner and a marketing roundtable.
Yeah.
And so it was like, for them, it was great because they got to speak to other marketers at SaaS companies at the same stage as them. And the rule was like, each of us has to bring and share one thing that's actually working well for us right now. And it's like, I got the benefit of, I get to meet and talk to all of those people and build a connection with them, but I'm also the connector of those people. And I found I will now only go to an event. Like, I hate events.
Yeah.
But so I will only go to them if I can organize something like that, or if the event has one of those event apps where you can book meetings, and I will only go if I've already booked a certain number of like meetings before the event starts.
So that's another hack that I do. So sometimes I have no intention of going to the thing, but I'll like send out like 20 or 30 feelers, and then like if a certain number do, I'll go.
Yeah.
And then if they don't, I just say, oh, sorry, I couldn't make it.
Couldn't make it. Something came up.
But let's chat.
Yeah.
The other hack to add on top of that is the last time I did it with the taco thing, like I got AWS to pay for they picked up the tab.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Right. So if you think about like your CMO thing, like
Yeah.
you go to like AppsFlyer and you're basically serving
Yeah.
their BD CMOs on a platter, right?
Yeah.
So you basically just get someone else to
To do
pay for
everything.
your marketing.
Yeah. There's a whole layers of like sequencing on this thing, right?
But again, it's like, it shows the importance of connections, right? Because it's like, think about this. I don't know, but the event you're at this week or last week, you probably during those 4 days met, I don't know how many people, but I would imagine hundreds of people. How many of those conversations do you actually like deeply remember the exact people and their names versus the people that were on the yacht with you? You probably remember all of them, right?
So I'm definitely like hyper disciplined on like my CRM maintenance.
Yeah.
So like after every conversation, like I'm popping in notes. Now with all the tools that are available, it becomes a lot easier. But I think being super disciplined on like your CRM stuff is key to that.
Are there any other tools that you're using to like help you with, obviously building a business, there's loads of tools involved, but how about when it comes to connections, networking?
It's a good question. So it's actually one of the questions that I ask, right? So to me, even if I don't know somebody's area of expertise, if I ask them, what tech stack do you actually use? That person should have a very strong opinion about it. If I ask somebody in finance, hey, what would your tech stack be if you set up like a finance department? If they're, I don't know, I would just use this thing. I know that they're not very good at what they do. The people who are very good at what they do are very, very particular about the specific things that they do. Like your audio guy, right? When I started asking about the microphone, like, I don't know anything about microphones, but I know for sure
That guy does.
That he does, right? Because he immediately lists like the 10 things. People who are very good at doing, like, they will not settle for like the second best thing, right? They know how to optimize for cost and performance. So for me, like, engineers have very, very strong opinion about like whether they use Linear or GitHub or all these things. Product managers are very particular about like all these things. Finance people are very particular, and they can tell me the exact differences between QuickBooks and Xero and like Puzzle and all these things, right?
For you as a like CEO and a founder, what's that thing? What's the thing that you're like, I need this every day? Or
I'm a Notion power user. Okay. In fact, when I was at AirAsia, like it was actually my filtering mechanism as well. So my first like 2 or 3 people that I bought in, like they were Notion fanatics.
Why Notion?
Because
I mean, I love Notion, but I'm just wondering.
Okay, what did you use before Notion?
Google Docs.
right. So for someone to use, so in other words, most people, they start on this trajectory, right? Like if you get your first microphone, it's like this thing that there's probably like a $30 Amazon thing that everybody gets, right? You start to learn the reason that it doesn't, and then you sort of like go towards that like top 1% one. Most people, when they probably start off with like Trello or something, or Google Docs, and then like there's very specific reasons why it doesn't work out. But then you're essentially going through the pain of migrating and changing your thing and doing all the explanation to like go to Notion, right? And same thing with like Linear. In general, engineers who use Linear tend to be very good because essentially they're going through this giant pain of this pursuit of optimizing their productivity, right? And they're switching away from like the Jiras of the world, right? So to me, like, if you ever want a quick hack to figure out whether somebody is very good at what they do, like ask them like, hey, what stack would you use if you had to set up a team or something?
Yeah, because you can always tell if someone's like on the cutting edge or if they're doing like same old or something like that.
Yeah, that microphone example, when I was asking for a microphone example, it was like a perfect example.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And it also depends on your business then too, because like in our business, our project management software is like an absolutely crucial part of what we do. And so if someone wants to work with us and they've either never used project management software before, or if we ask them how they use project management software and it's like, oh yeah, I just create a board and I put my tasks in there, immediately we know we can't really hire that person, you know? It's like you can figure out the depth of someone's knowledge of these things.
There's a positive filtering mechanism and there's also a negative filtering mechanism. So like engineers who use like Jira, that's like your default thing and they never get off that, right? I'm pretty sure there's probably like a very specific microphone that it's like the doofus one that like audiophiles would be like, oh, like scoff at, you know?
Yeah.
There are certain apps that like if I see that keyword on a CV, like they're automatically crossed off the list.
That's so funny. Yeah. That's so funny. I guess I'm kind of like that. I don't know if that comes into your like hiring process or not.
I will ask them technical questions. I'll ask them like, how do you use AI in your workflows? And, you know, I ask these types of questions because I'm looking for like cutting edge responses. I don't mind if they haven't used the right tools or used tools within my tech stack.
Yeah.
I'm looking for how are they thinking about things, and if they were to start working with us, are they going to be bringing a new level of thinking to our business?
I want to point out that there's no right or wrong answer, and I think what it is what you're actually doing is you're aligning on values, right? Like whether the specific set of tools that it's actually not the right answer, right? Like I could probably make a strong argument on using something else, but essentially you're aligning on core values, and having a team that actually has those aligned core values actually works, right? Like the best way to describe it is like my wife and I have very specific core values that we aligned on, and they're not right? Some of them are probably like don't make sense. The more important thing is that we're aligned on those values together, right? And that's what makes that partnership work.
Yeah, that's true. And it's pretty clear from this conversation so far that you have been able to align a lot of relationships, whether it's on a values level or on the skill set level. Like when you're thinking about the future for you and your businesses and things like this, how much are you thinking about, okay, I want these people to be involved in what I'm building? Or do you, because earlier on you were talking about moving company to company, like you always have an intention going in. Now as a leader, as a founder, are you trying to think 3 steps ahead of like, oh, I want this person on board with the team or as an investor, or you don't really think that way? You
think about those things, but at the end of the day, like when you're a startup in your early days, like everything is about velocity, and any descent, any deviation from those core values slows everything down, right? You know, my seed investor who we just closed a round with, like when I started talking about the way that they actually found me through like the conference hack that like I was talking about, right? So obviously like very clearly we aligned on values, right? You know, I think it's very important in the early days to just optimize for speed. You don't have to have the right answer because you never will, but like a fast moving team that gets a lot of wrong answers very quickly will always win. You mentioned you have these core values with the wife. Are they the same core values with your wife that you have inside of Belli as well? No, dude, the way that I learned this the hard way, but apparently the way that you run your marriage should actually be like the opposite of the way that you, like, okay. So like when I first got married, like you have to start doing the life planning thing, right? And like the first few times I did, I was like, okay, here's a Notion board, right? And like every single time, like my wife like left in tears, right? Because you apparently you cannot talk to your wife the same way that you talk to one of your employees, right? So like I've definitely learned to change my like. You're like, I need a 30, 60, 90 day plan, and I need it presented to me in a Notion board by next Tuesday. So we tried that once, and that was like the last time that we ever did it. We even did like a 360 review to each other. Terrible. I think for some relationships that works though too. I guess it depends on the person, because like my wife, I'm not very structured, right? Whereas my wife is like, everything has a ClickUp list, a Notion board or whatever. Yeah, mine is the same. Yeah, man. So with my wife, it's like we actively have those reviews, and it is kind of ironically like a review with a direct report. But for us, that works. I think it's different for everyone, you know. Yeah. I think it works for my wife. It works because she's managing me. But if I was managing her, I don't think it would fly. Yeah. When you're a founder, you're in full control of everything. Yeah. Like marriage is completely different. Yeah. I don't feel like you're in control when you're married. No. Yeah. I, even as a founder, I'm not sure if I'm in control of everything, you know? Yeah. It's like you went the COVID, the coup in Myanmar. It's like you couldn't really do anything about these things, you know? Have there been any like surprising connections you've made along the way? Anyone where you've been like, how did I meet that person? Or like, let me think about that and I'll come back. Yeah, sure. And how about when it comes to
When it comes to your values, okay, so we've seen like speed is something that's speed to execution seems to be important to you. You've talked about expanding the surface area of like opportunities. For anyone who's watching who is in the early phases of building their business or even the midpoint of building their business, do you see any other recurring themes of like, okay, if someone exhibits this, I think this is leads to a higher chance of them being successful or anything like that?
I have a very, very soft spot for people who are willing to change things in a company, right? So a lot of senior hires that I have, what they have is a very innate way of not just influencing the way that they do things, but also changing like the way an entire team or organization runs, right? Because it's not difficult to do that. You're always going to ruffle some feathers. So I think, yeah, being able to think on that, you're putting the org above yourself at all times.
And
right?
that can be a challenge with this like first principles thinking as well, though, right? It's like this double-edged. Okay,
because you're optimizing for different things. Okay, look, if your goal in life is to like work at a company and get promoted,
yeah,
you do not do those. You don't.
yeah,
Because essentially what you should optimize for is being universally liked and high visibility projects.
Yeah.
And you can actually work at a company and do all those things and actually not do a single like thing of work
yeah,
and succeed and continue to get promoted. And there are
Yeah.
people that are very good at that game, right?
It's like being a politician, isn't it?
And it is, but I mean, whatever. I mean, I would argue that it's helpful because it just keeps the vibe in check and everybody moving. And but like the people who
Head
are
of culture.
right, but
but only at huge companies, though, right?
right, but a founder's strength actually can serve as a weakness because like founders typically when they work at some organizations, like they're going around pissing everybody off and like trying to like just change everything that
Yeah.
is outside their lane. Like that's not helpful for a big company
Yeah,
or most organizations.
yeah,
I think earlier to your question of the most unusual connection. So when I was at McKinsey, I had to host like the annual Christmas party every year, and it's actually on the internet, but we made like this. I had to sing this song about life in consulting, and
You sang the song?
I had to sing the song. It sounds like two cats like fighting each other, but I sang a song, and it was basically about life in consulting, and it kind of tied in all these little different nuances that like only they would know about. And there's this one part where we talk about the things that we loved and the things that we hate. We hated using this app called Box, and then everybody would kind of boo and like snicker. And then there was this one app that we had called Raidu, where like the moment that I said, "Oh, like get your expenses approved on Raidu," like the crowd went wild, right? Because people, I don't know if you know anything about consulting, but like you do a lot of like reimbursables, and then like people love like that. People love that feeling of like getting the money, getting their own money back.
Yeah.
Right. Loudest cheer of the entire song. So then fast forward a couple of years. I'm at some like fintech festival or something. One of those like ones that was total waste of time. Terrible conference, to be honest, right? But some guy, some German guy like pings me on the app. It's like, hey, just I'm a VC, be interested in like learning more about what you do. Then it's one of those like random calls that every entrepreneur gets. Took the call, and then yeah, pretty cool business. Would love to introduce you to the founders. And then I go into the next call with the partner. He was the guy who built and sold that Raidu app. And you can imagine like, especially like if you're running an expense, you never actually meet the people who are using your app. So you can imagine how we immediately hit it off. So he was the one who recently like just did our latest investment round.
wow, that's cool.
Did he know that you had sung that song?
We both had no idea. But the moment that I heard Raidu, I was like, the first.
Did you like whack the video out straight away? You're like, you've got to see this.
I said,
You've got to see this. Give me all your money now.
I said, before we start, there's something that I need to show you. And like, he went in completely not knowing, and like you could just see in the video. Like, I wish I would have videotaped it, but you can see his heart melt.
That's so cool.
In the first few minutes.
Oh, no.
That's a deal closer there, isn't it?
yeah. They should have used that in ads or something.
So if there's
on.
one thing you've learned, it's just sing songs about
Sing songs,
potential
yeah.
future investors.
One thing that's very interesting to me about your journey so far is like you clearly repeatedly stepped into, like, I don't know, established environments or industries that have been the way they are right now for a long time and are clearly ripe for some kind of change? Or I feel like this, I don't know, I feel like this challenger mentality.
I want to preface this as well, but like every company that I've worked at, like I basically got fired from every single one of them. So I wouldn't, I don't want to, I don't want to over glamorize.
No, but that's what I want to ask you about,
Yeah.
right? It's like you come in and you want to change things. Has that been a challenge for you of like, because you just said it there, like you've been fired from these places or whatever. It's like, is that a challenge that comes with having this mindset of like wanting to grow things or change things or do things differently, that actually have to handle a lot of this, not necessarily rejection, but like people that don't want to change? Like how do you manage those kind of conversations or environments? Like I imagine you go to some airlines now and you show them what you guys are doing, and some of them are probably like, this is the best thing in the world. And some of them might think it's I don't know, like, why would we change? We don't want to do this, whatever. Like, how do you handle, scary.
No, look,
like, why do we even need to do that? How do you handle those
just,
kind of
it's
environments?
pattern recognition, honestly. Like I'll go, I mean, now I know that the moment that I talk to an airline, if like the guy that I'm talking to is like 65, like, and he's using a certain piece of software, like I know in a million years, I'm not going to land that deal, right? It's okay. You move on and you go to the next one. And there are airlines where honestly, like we get a deal done in like a couple of weeks, right? Because they have a mandate, they want to change things, they believe that. And there's some airlines where like they go through the demo and they're like, this is like 100x better than whatever we're using now, but I can't change anything.
Can't
like
drive this huge change through the business.
right. Like you see that in their eyes, right? Like because they're to work at an airline. An airline is basically the opposite of a startup. At a startup, you are optimizing for frequency of failure as quickly as possible. At an airline, you are, if you have the option of adding on a layer of something that increases something from 99% to 99.5%, like you do it, right? But it's safety, right? Like, so there's this, it's the opposite of a startup because you're essentially adding on layers and layers of processes because you have to, it's safety, right? So you would never do anything that disturbs that process.
In those early days, I mean, I know it's still like, startup days, but in those really early days, was it difficult in that environment? Was it difficult to land a sale?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously, we had a lot of things going against us. We were unknown. We had a small team. We had, we didn't have a track record. But I think every startup goes through this. But ultimately, you immediately begin to identify the patterns on who your ICP and who your ideal customer profile is. And we settled on a very specific niche in our first year.
If you land one airline, let's say Lufthansa or Delta or something, does that immediately get you all of their cargoes?
It does. So everything now is like definitely 100 times easier than it was in my first month. So remember my first month, I was like a one person like thing trying to sell enterprise software to airlines. But we ended up finding a couple of airlines that were really great to work with. They were really quick to get set up. And that eventually opened up the deal for a large Middle Eastern airline, right? I would have never been able to get that had I not done those fast ones early on.
How did you get that one? The Middle Eastern one?
That one I got pretty lucky because the incoming CIO knew of me.
How did he know of you?
This one was an interesting story. So he was a former consulting client in Singapore, and essentially at the time he was working for a pharmaceutical company, and I was actually just on a consulting project, and helping him like optimize his logistics stack. And my wife got pissed at me because like I ended up ending the contract early because like we had finished up, and I honestly could have just sat there and just showed up and gotten like a lot of money to stay on for another 3 months. And then you can imagine like my wife was super pissed because now for the next like month or two, like I was just kind of sitting at home like farting around, right? But he remembered that, right? And so you can imagine like that moment that I had not thought about at the time like circles back. Now all of a sudden he's like the CIO of like a large Middle Eastern airline, right? So I think if you do good by people, like that always will come through. Same thing with SpaceX. Like SpaceX, I would actively like tell them like when they were being irresponsible to ask for certain things because like the ROI wasn't there, right? But they remembered that, right? That I'm doing things that I would have done in that situation rather than somebody who's just optimizing for running up the bill.
Is that a principle that you carry on throughout your life of like, because we've talked before about networking and making connections and things like this, and how honestly it's so much easier if you actually just do the right thing, and like be a good person. It's like, it's crazy how simple that advice is, but how few people still follow these principles. So you thinking about that in like business decisions and people that you're meeting, you're just trying to help them, help yourself. Like, how do you look at that?
But to be clear, it's a curse, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's lay a scenario out there. Let's say that you're at a dinner table with, I don't know, a potential customer, and he's like rude to the waiter.
Yeah.
Do you say something?
I guess it depends on the level of the rudeness.
Right. So do you see what I mean? So do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's to be clear, it's a curse because
Yeah.
you're also putting yourself in a situation where you're pissing people off
Yeah.
if you stay true to your values and you're authentic. So it's not a good thing. And like there are times when like my wife is kicking me on the table because she knows I'm going to open my mouth about something, and I'm like physically incapable of doing it. Right.
I've lost friends that way. I had a friend, he was being pretty inappropriate with one of the waiters, and she was not enjoying that at all. And I was like, I told him off at the dinner. It was a lunch actually, but I told him off, and we don't talk now.
Yeah. Well, people don't like it,
It's not. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like your strength can also be a weakness. Right?
Yeah. That actually cost me a lot of money because he was helping me sell my company.
No.
Yeah. Right.
Well, then it probably cost him a lot of money too,
Well, yeah, I suppose so, yeah. So no one won out of that. But I don't regret it because I feel like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I don't see that ever coming back and being,
It is very difficult to stay true to your values when money is on the line. It's very difficult.
As we start to maybe wrap this conversation up a little bit.
we're going to throw you some quick questions.
Okay.
What's your go-to coffee order?
I used to always get an Americano, but I think lately there's always a high variance that different coffee places do on the amount of water, and sometimes it just comes back like soup. So I just started hitting with a double espresso because it minimizes the variance.
Optimizing time as
oh my
well.
God, that was
That's such a
nerdy
founder answer, dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah.
God,
Optimized coffee, yeah.
That's also one of the reasons I stopped drinking coffee with milk, was because if I go to the coffee shop, there's always a queue of like 3 or 4 people that have ordered lattes or cappuccinos, and you have to wait like 5 minutes whilst they make it. So I'm like, I'm just going to drink espresso or filter coffee,
Yeah, 100%. If
That's
there's
so
filter
funny.
available, I'll take it.
What is, in your opinion, the best business book that you have read?
I'll be honest, I don't read too many of those like business books
Yeah.
that you see in the airport. I find them a little bit dated. I think where I consume a lot of my data is on
Upwork.
no, not Upwork. I mean, there's so much great content on like LinkedIn there. There's so many people that like Lenny's newsletter, Scott Galloway, like the amount of great content out there. Like we are in a golden age of amazing people who have this distribution to like get really great ideas.
Yeah.
out there.
And they're putting their ideas out right now, not 10, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like before, I feel like now you have to move so quickly, whereas before you could read, I don't know, an article or something and people would be sharing their knowledge, but it'd be their knowledge that worked 6 months ago or a year ago. Now you can't really do that so much, right? It's like if you're sharing something that's working now, it has to be working now. Well, what have you put on the card? Are you finished or are you still going?
I haven't finished, but great people who are 1% masters of their craft, like Andre,
Yeah.
are very picky about their tools.
Nice. I like that.
What's a startup myth you wish would die?
I think people definitely over glamorize the startup life. They underestimate how difficult and painful it is.
It's almost a disease, isn't it? Like to want to do this.
It is. It's never a mathematically correct decision. I think we only see the tip of the iceberg on the successes. We don't see the tough parts. So I think I see this actually happening a lot, where like people who are on the verge of like doing a startup start like talking with their friends and like pitching their idea, and everybody is way too nice in that process. And the worst thing you can do is be too nice to a person in that situation, because essentially you're leading them down the road where they waste 2 to 3 years of their life doing something that they should not be doing.
It's pretty hard to talk someone out of it though when they're decide. Like I had this conversation with a guy and he pitched me an idea and it was the worst thing I've ever heard, and it was really bad. And I was like, "There's no way this is gonna fly, man." I was trying to tell him like, "This is just not how this works. Like this is not how people do this thing."
So if you still went out and did it, I'm actually inclined to like believe him, because essentially like the power of conviction in those early days is actually more powerful than being right or wrong, right?
But it didn't go. It didn't fly.
Okay.
Yeah, it
I mean-
failed in his ass. So-
But you're right though. Like sometimes having blind conviction in something is enough to get it started.
Because that's the fuel
Yeah.
in that early days, because there is no data. There is
and
no
that idea can evolve and turn into something else. And
Yeah.
maybe it could have been good, but
There's a stat out there where like older founders tend to be more successful, and again, I don't think it's because you're smarter or anything, but I think it's because your conviction level must be higher, because there's so much more at stake
Right.
as you get up in age, and so it's essentially the same pool from when you were in your 20s, but it's only like the top 5% who have that level of conviction. Right?
The final question that we have for you whilst you're finishing that is, who is one founder or leader that you really admire and why? And to add to that, have you worked with them? I'm curious.
I regret deeply not working at a big tech company early in my career and not getting to work with like the really great entrepreneurs side by side. But I think definitely my pre-seed investors, Shu, Ken, and Brian, I think I remember almost every single time that they opened their mouth, they embodied something that I had always felt but could never explain, right? Like the Roger Bannister thing, right? That was theirs, right? Yeah, great deal of respect for them. I think they helped me get to where I am today.
awesome. Well, I think this is a good place to leave it.
Thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And like
I've
sharing
learned
this.
so much. I mean, that Upwork hack, that's
The
something
Upwork
else.
for learning is
I actually
pretty crazy.
I actually so many hacks. Another filtering mechanism that I use in Upwork, which is actually translated to my overcover. So anytime you post something on Upwork, there's always going to be like thousands of responses, and essentially what you want to do is you want to get to something that filters out 90% as quickly as possible. And the thing that I actually use is a 60-second typing test. So if you give a 60-second typing test on Upwork, it immediately helps you filter out the bottom 80%, right? Because again, anybody can claim anything on Upwork, but a typing test immediately helps filter out the bottom 80% that are clearly wasting your time. And I've actually like systematically tested this at the airline that I was at, where we actually gave that same test to incoming new hires, and I even did this blind, where I told HR to not tell me what their score was, and immediately after the first 3 days, I could immediately predict who scored where. And it was fascinating because it transcended seniority, it transcended department. So you had developers that scored very low that clearly struggled during the first like few days, and the people who were like the junior employees who just scored really high picked up everything that you threw their way, and they were the ones that got promoted very quickly. So I think for very specific markets, like this works really well. Like obviously it wouldn't work at a place like McKinsey, but for this general pool situation, like the typing test, time and time again, I'm consistently surprised at how strong of a predictive indicator it is on ability.
So what is a typing test? Like, how would it?
Because essentially what it's doing is it's doing a couple things. It's very quickly filtering out a blunt assessment of your technical skills. An example is like, I think I'm surprised. I would have imagined that over time, because I've been doing this for about 15 years, I would have imagined that over time typing tests got higher and higher, but it's actually not the case. You have a lot of Gen Z, like people in their 20s who actually are very terrible on a computer, right? So you're very quickly filtering out those people who just, I don't know, are not like fast typers. Somebody who can type 100 words per minute, I guarantee you, like they can pick up any technical skill that you throw at them, right? And it also filters out people who just like can't do stuff.
So they just have to answer a couple of questions, or
Yeah, it's specific to Upwork. What it also does a really good job of is it processes language as well. So in a lot of countries, when you're dealing with like outsourcing to Upwork, language is very important, and somebody who has a language barrier and the ability to think of that language will never score very high on that, right? Like you've been through this when you hire an Upwork. There are people that first like week or so, like you can just tell, and this does a good job of filtering those people out.
So how do you set that test up? Is it built into Upwork, or do you use a separate tool?
You just send them a link. There's a million tests that are out there, but like that 60-second test it's an incredibly powerful predictive indicator. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I used to make them take like a speed test on their internet, back when like that was an issue, like 10 years ago in the Philippines. Now obviously it's not an issue.
Don't worry about it.
Another one that I look at is I have them take a picture of their office setup, right? The nerdy ones always have like big screens and then sometimes I see like just like a 14-inch Chromebook. I'm like,
Yeah, it's not quite
So
right.
like you're eliminating. So again, you're eliminating those like those like outliers that like are very the obvious ones, right?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of tricks on Upwork.
I'm gonna have to pick your brain on some of those because there's some really good, little insights.
Yeah.
Well, let's try to wrap that up again, shall we? No, but I think we could just keep going.
If you're hiring somebody who's going to be working with spreadsheets and data a lot, I ask them, what is your favorite Excel shortcut? That says a lot about somebody.
Do you give them like a timeline to?
No, you just say, what's your favorite Excel shortcut? But you also have to embed it in a way that it doesn't. It's not obvious that that's the thing that you're looking for. So, for example, like I'll ask like 3 or 4 questions that are just like whatever, but they're actually just like I don't even look at those. Those are just like those are decoys, right? What I actually just care about is that one question on the typing test and like some of these other
That's so interesting.
Interesting. I think you just revolutionized my recruiting process. No, yeah, man. Thank you so much. This has been educational, like to say the least.
Thanks for having me, guys.